Uh, it's been way too long since I've done one of these. Well, ladies, gentlemen, and every magnificent thing between and outside, this is the Envoy of Kairos, back to introduce another huge wave of content for my Western Middle East-inspired Pokemon region, Mesopas. So, when we left off, I focused on multi-form Pokemon and covered Pokemon featured all across the region. Today will be a little different. I'd like to focus on Pokemon inspired by the culture and ecology of a single country represented in this region. In this case, Turkey. Anatolia has been heavily contested through the vast majority of human history, resulting in it being conquered, owned, and taken from many, many empires and cultures over the millennia. This, of course, has resulted in the local culture becoming almost as much of a melting pot as America's, but also containing more distinct representations of its major inspirations, resulting in an artistic hodgepodge of every Southern European and Asian culture you can imagine. So there's a pretty wide variety of things to represent here. But it's also resulted in this region containing an unnaturally large number of regional variants, regional evolutions, and even some convergent Pokemon. There's also a lot of grass types here, and that's all due to the abundance of greenery here compared to the rest of the region. But really, that's all in the spirit of properly representing one of the most diverse and historied areas in the world. So I think it can be forgiven. And if you have any complaints about the accuracy, do keep in mind that everything here has been run past Turkish citizen and Islamic Pokefan LuminantLion over on Discord. Can't thank you enough for all the help, man. And he recently told me he's planning to start streaming soon, so keep an eye out for him. So, without further ado, let's move on to our first Pokemon representative of Anatolic culture. And to begin with an original, let's delve into one of the most classic Turkish fairy tales. The tale of Kız Kalesi, or the Maiden's Castle. A king of the late Ottoman Empire had just been blessed with a daughter, but a soothsayer warned him upon her birth that she would one day be slain by a snakebite. In a panic, he ensured his daughter would spend her life locked safely in a tower, but would profusely apologize for her imprisonment with constant deliveries of the most lavish gifts his kingdom could offer. This one day led to their downfall, as a basket of wine and grapes contained the very snake that was prophesied to bite her. A classic tale of futility against fate, found in most cultures around the world. But seeing as this one is such a popular tale, focused on an actual location within Turkey, I simply had to make a Pokemon for it. So, I'd like to introduce you to Daluzum. Its name is based on Dal's whip snake, Loop for the coiled vine body and spiraled eyes, and Uzum being Turkish for great. Given that it's named after Dal's whip snake, its shape is clearly a reference to this as well. The species was named after its similarity to a leather whip, but it's also a very similar coloration and width to young grapevines. They're also known to frequently live in the old stone walls bordering the country's oldest vineyards. This one is purely grass type, but if you consider the legend, it must become poison soon enough, right? Well, meet its evolution. Oozatrop. Of course, its name comes from Uz, Uzum, Sarap meaning wine, and Satrap, which was a name for a provincial governor for the area during the Hellenistic period, and came to be associated with corruption in positions of power, a snake in the king's court. With this evolution, they've become poison type. earned imposing new fangs, and their great bodies have begun to ferment into alcoholic venom. This results in their original move, Fermented Fang, a strong poisonous bite attack that causes confusion rather than poisoning. Strong confusion-inducing moves like Dizzy Punch tend to be quite effective and popular, so having one that happens to be poison type and a bite move on a Pokemon with Strong Jaw makes for a strong member of any team. But that's enough of that line. We've got a lot to cover yet, so how about something a little more light-hearted, with a regional I've seen done a few times, but I really love my own take on it here. This is Mesopan Drifloon and Drifblim. You see, if you've ever had any interest in Turkish tourism, you've likely heard all about the Cappadocia Balloon Festival. This thing is massive, taking over this whole ancient city and surrounding towns with the sight of countless balloons in the air, and the scent of carnival food and sweets saturating it all. I wanted to capture the festivity to the fullest, so I went ahead and made a fairy flying type variant of these classic spooky airbags. But rather than just a festive balloon, they also have another common fairy type trait: food. You see, this species came about when Sonoan Drifloon migrated to Mesopas and learned to savor the taste of positive emotions from this area's prosperous people. As such, they dropped their ghost type for fairy, and then learned to consume flour, butter, and sugar to produce a popular candy known as pismaniye. It's essentially a heartier and slightly healthier equivalent to cotton candy. It's slightly stringier, resembling raw cotton or wool, and it made sense to turn into the tuft-atop Drifloon's head, and then shape it into a rounded block of the stuff, like it's been packaged for sale. They then gift their pismaniye to children, to get a steady source of joy to consume year-round, though they all prefer their feast during the festival. When they evolve to Drifblim, this food theme expands, as their greater lift and carrying capacity allows them to produce a more solid candy in addition, which I'm sure most of you will be familiar with: Turkish Delight. With a double dose of candy for their trainers or random passers-by, and multiple times the production due to their size, they're quite popular across the region. But most parents of Mesopas won't let their children have one of their own, as that usually results in a lot of dental work and obesity. Well, that's an original and a regional down. How about a regional evolution now? Makuhita made its way here from Eastern Asia after some time, and learned from the most honorable bare-handed combatants of Mesopas to form a new fighting style that took great advantage of its build and grappling skill: Turkish oil wrestling. As a result, we have Mesopan Hariyama. As oil wrestling is done in thick grass and covered in plant-based oils, I've given them the grass type, producing their own plant oils instead of sweat. Oil wrestling was first produced as a form of combat meant to discard strength as an overwhelming factor and focus more on individual skill, using the oil as a balancing factor. This then results in Mesopan Hariyama walking into battle with the new ability, Field of Honor. This causes all stat buffs in play to be balanced between all combatants on the field, which makes playing your own buffs rather difficult, resulting in having to build plays around him to make proper use of his ability, or you could be nerfing yourself as well. It's not quite as obnoxious as Haze Crobat, but still a play to keep an eye out for. Now, how about one of our convergents? This time we have an excellent little Mon, which already had a convergent premiere very recently. But the concept behind this one was too good for me not to run with. In Turkish culture, despite technically being considered haram, it's quite common to hold fortune-telling sessions, using the remaining coffee grounds at the bottom of your cup. Americans may be extremely confused by this, but you must consider how Turkish coffee is made. The grounds are left in the pot without any filter, and the water is boiled as the pot is dragged through searing hot sands and poured into a cup while still boiling. It results in a much thicker, stronger coffee, in which a single small cup can provide a serious caffeine boost. But it also leaves a thick, mud-like coffee mess at the bottom to be used for this fortune-telling. But that's not the only lore about coffee in this area. According to some Islamic texts, coffee was prophesized as a form of panacea, a cure-all natural medicine, which was later taught to the Prophet Muhammad by the Archangel Gabriel himself. It's also been commonly used as a powerful mental and spiritual stimulant, especially by the Sufi monks of Yemen. As such, I simply had to make a coffee Pokemon, which is, of course, a convergent of Sinistea and Poltegeist. So, I'd like to introduce you to Miskave and Pravilak. Miskave is, of course, mystic, and kave, meaning coffee. And Pravilak adds in prophecy, and ilash, meaning medicine. To suit all the fortune-telling and healing aspects, as well as the mud-like texture of the used coffee grounds and the sand that it's all boiled in, I had to make them psychic ground type. This varies them up significantly from the previous two possessive caffeine fiends they're based on, and suits the abundance of psychic-type healing moves. They'll also come with an original attack called Morning Rush, a buff move giving themselves and their allies a temporary +2 to speed and special attack, but it only lasts 3 turns before becoming a -1. Adding in moves like Psychic, Searing Sands, Scald, and Earth Power, and you've got quite the dangerous special sweeper on your hands. And now that we've done a full round of all types of new Mon coming, let's start from the top with another original grass type. When looking into unique plants to use for this region, one of the first to come to my attention was a flower with 2 very rare properties, now commonly found at Mount Ararat, as well as in northwest Turkey. Although this species originally migrated here through bird leavings, flying south from Eastern Europe, Eastern European culture has had a large impact in Turkey, and this flower has taken on a role as a symbol of multiple values that are critical to the area's culture. The flower in question is Galanthus nivalis, also best known as the snowdrop. This line begins in seed form as Kardrop, Kar being Turkish for snow. It's pure grass type, and remains as such for its entire line, surprisingly, but starts off with a powerful new ability called Snowpiercer. This represents the flower's inclination for sprouting and blooming in low temperatures, before the spring thaw has arrived. This gives them and any of their allies at the time the ability to resist ice-type moves, removing one of the greatest weaknesses of the grass type and making them a far more balanced unit for any team. As they evolve, Kardrop becomes Kardolan. This comes from Kardolan, which is just the Turkish name for the flower, and Solemn, for its somber and serious demeanor. Its head is always bowed seemingly in prayer, positioned much like a snowdrop flower's own head and petals. This is due to the seed pods growing in the upper stem being too heavy for the rest to hold it up, resulting in the whole flower bending over. But then comes this flower's other rare trait. The snowdrop is one of the few double-blooming species in the world, in which a genetic mutation causes some to randomly bloom twice, forming much larger and more complex petal formations and patterns, as well as having stronger stems to compensate. In this case, it's even such a drastic change that the seed pod no longer causes its stem to bend, resulting in bearing the beautiful white and green pattern of its petals for all to see. As such, their final form, Sempadolin, is based on this double-bloomed variant. It's now wearing a full petal gown with a wide headdress of 6 enormous petals, making them appear much like a joyful priest or priestess. This one's name now includes Sempati, which is a borrowed word based on sympathy. Sempadolin has taken the harsh conditions it grew in and saw others grow in, and turned it into motivation to be the cheeriest, most supportive Pokemon it can be, striving through the worst the world can throw at it, and guiding others to do the same with a smile. As such, they've become an incredible support unit, which comes with a plethora of healing and defensive techniques. For our next regional variant, let's take a look at another princess-focused legend. This time, we have the tale of Ainali Magra, the Mirrored Cave. And no, we're not talking about the Nuzlocke killer from Generation 6. This tale comes from the great port city of Acacia, and tells of a princess so beautiful that no man could survive looking upon her face. This made finding a suitor incredibly difficult, and to help her, her father started a competition. Suitors from across the kingdom would come dressed to be wed, and tasked with lifting her veil and living. If one could, they would be wed to her immediately. One such man succeeded, but upon lifting the veil, the passion of their love at first sight was so overwhelmingly powerful that it set the entire castle ablaze. The castle burned with them in it, and the two of them were interred within a cave north of Acacia. It is said to only be found one day a year, when the sun reflects off the mirrored walls at the back of the cave. A slightly sad but wonderful tale, which I simply had to represent. But rather than just the princess, I chose to represent both sides, as well as the unique and stunning Turkish wedding dresses and suits. As such, I give you Mesopan Ralts, a fire psychic type. Now, I'm sure you can already see exactly where this is going. From there, we have Mesopan Curlia, wearing a veil and dressed somewhat androgynously, and of course, branching into Mesopan Gardevoir and Gallade. Their horns have grown into full crowns, the prince and princess living again as pyrokinetic royalty, forever garbed in their stunning wedding clothes. It's also traditional for the groom of a Turkish wedding to wield a decorative sword, usually a kilij or shamshir, which is also often worn and used by royalty and generals. As such, Gallade once again drops one type and becomes fire fighting. I had so much fun designing these two. They're still some of my favorites from the entire videos collection. Maybe that's because I'm so partial to reds. But it's time to move on from them to another regional evolution variant. So, how about we see what happens when a Wooloo evolves in Mesopas? Well, here we have Mesopan Dubwool, based on the Kariaka sheep and surrounding long-wooled species commonly used by the Ottoman Empire and its descendants. Their wool naturally grows into long strands almost akin to dreadlocks, and their horns grow into a more curved shape. The unique details I chose to represent with them, though, is that their wool is commonly and popularly used for producing Persian and Turkish rugs. Everyone's seen them, Their designs are seen all over the world, ancient, geometrically designed master crafts that last the ages and provide excellent decor just about anywhere. As such, I've chosen to make Mesopan Dubwool a cosmetic variant Pokemon that references this art, similar to Furfrou. Their wool can be dyed and woven into a series of geometric patterns representing various high-level legendary Pokemon of biblical significance, also making them a living Lamb of God in the process. The variants include Alpha, Omega, Diamond, Pearl, Reggie, and 2 more that you won't have access to until endgame content. Additionally, having wool woven into rugs builds up a lot of electricity, making this species, of course, a normal electric type that channels all that static into its horns. This does often blind them with the sparks going off in their faces, though, until they're properly trained to mitigate it. So, 2 of all categories but convergence. How about a second one of those now? This one also happens to be our last grass type for this video. In Turkey, there's old myths of a type of nature spirit, a fae, called a nem. They use illusions to disguise themselves as foxes and common plants, even taking the form of houseplants to get easy access to food and water, but then take the form of foxes to play with children when parents are away. This goes quite well with the fact that Turkey may have the oldest equivalent to a chia pet in history. The Chim Adam, meaning grassman, a common customizable children's toy that's a combination of a chia pet and Mr. Potato Head. Putting all of this together, I realized the illusions and foxes already lined up wonderfully with an existing species, resulting in me making the Zorua convergent Nemua. Oddly enough, Nemua even looks more similar to its original name than one would expect, as the N is just Zorua's Z turned on its side. This is a grass fairy type, which, oddly enough, we don't really have many of just yet. And a wild Nemua will often destroy and replace houseplants, staying in people's homes to play with their kids and steal their food. Because of the houseplant disguise, I chose to build some terracotta pottery shards into its design, replacing the ears and adding some protection for their feet. Their true body is the plant within the soil, but being young, they need that soil for protection and water retention, until they manage to evolve, if they do. Their illusions are usually used for selfish and chaotic means, but rarely malicious, landing them safely in Fey territory over dark types. But when a Nemua matures and learns to use its illusions to protect something greater than itself, whether that be its family, its forest, or even its trainer, it becomes a Nemoarch. The soil is cast aside as to become a tall, flowering tree with elven ears, and the pottery is discarded as fairy-powered crystal fruit grow from the flowers and bark. The crystals project their illusions into a much greater range around them, some stronger ones managing to hide the contents of entire acres from any ne'er-do-wells that may pass by. They've become staunch guardians of nature, with elven grace and lupine ferocity. Coming across them in the woods after accidentally treading on their territory is sure to be an imposing sight with a grisly end. And now, only one remains for this presentation. We've come a long way, but there's one more convergent Pokemon to cover, and it's of a species I doubt anyone would expect. But first, a story. After so many empires rose and fell, and were rapidly replaced all throughout Anatolia, the remains of the unfinished Kütahya Castle were found, and a legend was told to explain them. Giants had come to this land in search of a new addition to their empire, building the castle with their bare hands, standing shoulder to shoulder as they transported masses of stone from the mountains to the west. With their work only half done, their prince suddenly fell ill and died. Terrified by this sudden loss, and having come from a land of immortals, they were appalled and repelled, fleeing to their homeland with the castle incomplete. Their king went on to say, if he had known that death existed in this region, he would have never put one stone atop another. To represent these constructive giants, I've created a convergent rock type, based on one of the most hated fighting type lines in the Pokemon canon. As such, I give you Cinder and Boulder. Yes, I somehow managed to make Timber and Girder look good, just by changing their type. But of course, these two don't reference the full story. You may be wondering where its equivalent to Conkeldurr is. You see, its final evolution leads them in a slightly different direction, referencing the death of the prince to add a new type to the mix. When a boulder finds the perfect rare stones with which to complete its den, they disappear into it for weeks, seemingly to meditate without food or water of any kind. Upon emerging, they have evolved to lead their tribe as Sepuldur. Sepuldur, of course, is produced with a dusk stone, and becomes rock ghost type. Their entire back and broad shoulders is a stone sarcophagus, and their walking stick is based on a common design for gravestones in the Ottoman Empire. This gives them a very similar stature to the original Conkeldurr, but also a bit more wizened and distinguished. But oh boy, I'm not done yet. They come with the ability Crypt Keeper, which triggers at half health. Their speed is reduced, and their defense and attack both raise as they pull the lid off their back, wielding it as a second weapon, while a ghostly purple mist pours off their back, and their secret weapon rises from their open sarcophagus. Sepuldur Open Mode is an imposing lord of whichever mountain they call home, guarding it with the knowledge and guidance of generations long past, partially possessing it. The few trainers that manage to fully tame one should not be taken lightly, as a Sepuldur that fully respects its trainer is one led by someone wise and experienced enough for the spirits within to seek guidance from or see an equal in. Well, on that imposing note, I believe I've rambled long enough for this video. I'll have to cut it off here, but rest assured this is very far from over. I'm still only getting started with this region, and I'll be bringing you another plethora of Pokemon before the end of the year. In fact, you can expect another video on Turkish Pokemon in December, as a little celebration of something everyone seems to forget Turkey has any connection to. Soon after that, I'm hoping to bring you all the first video delving into the region's professor, gym leaders, and plot, alongside several Pokemon in this same part of the region that have a lot less focus on Turkish culture, and even some redesigns of a few I've shown you before. So, I hope you've all enjoyed this hefty dose of Mesopan Pokemon, and if you're looking forward to more and you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe and stick around for more of them. And leave a comment below with any questions you have about these Pokemon, or just telling me what your favorite is. I usually respond to every comment, so I'll get back to you within a day on that. Unless I suddenly get hundreds of times more comments than I usually do. So, for now, keep on gaming, enjoy the Scarlet Violet DLC, and I'll see you all soon for more gameplay videos, and hopefully next month for some new original content. This is the Envoy of Kairos, signing out. Later, guys.